can have a seat. There are different types of sermons. There's sermons that are to inspire, that make you feel like you can climb any mountain and achieve any goal. And there are sermons that correct you. They confront you when you're in the middle of a wrong direction. They give you words of advice, whether you want to hear those words of advice or not. And sometimes guilt comes out of those sermons. They're sermons that teach you. They just give you better theology. They help you to understand different nuances of the character of God, or how we're made, or how the world is made, or how the Holy Spirit works. There are all kinds of different sermons, those that correct, those that inspire, those that instruct. And then there are sermons that just are meant to help make sense of something. And my goal here tonight and my goal next week is to try to make sense of what is one of the most frequently asked questions in the body of Christ for like thousands of years. It's one of the most frequently asked questions on this campus. It's a question that's asked so often in so many lives that the church ought to address it more often than we do, but unfortunately we don't. We rarely talk about why God doesn't make sense sometimes. And so my goal tonight and my goal next week isn't so much to instruct or to inspire or to correct you. My goal is to try to make sense of God, to try to make sense of maybe some confusing aspect of your life now or later. Some of you, this is preemptive medicine. It's not something you need at this particular moment. For you, in this moment, everything looks right. It looks like a crystal clear windshield and a car driving in a sunny day in the middle of it. But for some of you, this isn't preemptive medicine. This is the emergency room. You're in a place in your life right now where your faith is hanging on a thread because something has happened in your life or something has happened in the world that you just can't figure out, and God doesn't make sense to you right now. And I want to try to make sense of all of that. This is the type of sermon and sermons that when you listen to them, hopefully at some point you'll say, wow, that makes sense. Maybe God makes a little more sense. But just let's start with a little survey, okay? I want you to raise your hand if you've ever asked God the question, why? I want you to raise your hand if you've ever wondered of God, like how could you allow something to happen in my life or in the world? Have you asked those questions before? We have all asked those questions before. We ask those questions when natural disasters occur. We ask those questions when surprises happen in our lives. We ask those questions when little everyday things go wrong, when things just seem to fall apart. We have phrases in our language that have become commonplace, like when it rains, it pours, to try to make sense of these moments when life gets difficult and difficult to understand. And so what I'm going to do in working through this topic with you tonight and next Wednesday is I'm going to take as an example a particular prophet in a particular book in Scripture. The book is the book of Habakkuk, and the prophet is named Habakkuk. It's a story of a prophet that didn't spend so much time like talking to the people on behalf of God. The entire book is basically a confused conversation between a man who knew God very well and a God that he didn't understand. When you understand and when you read the book of Habakkuk, it's like you're sitting inside the corner of a room as a secret listener, as one of the most godly men in history squares off with a God he doesn't understand. A righteous, godly, faith-filled man asking God, having the gall to ask God questions that maybe we are sometimes scared to ask God. And so what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to lay a little bit of context so you understand it, and then I'm going to walk you through the story, and then I'm going to give you just a few points and we'll be done. But when you're studying the Old Testament though, let me just start here. And particularly when you're studying a prophet, you need to understand the context, because prophecies were written at a particular time in history to a particular people to address a particular issue. And when you're talking about context in the Bible, you want to think of three things. You think of the author, you think of the politics, and you think of the faith of that time. So who wrote the book, what's happening in the church, and what's happening in the world that all of this is existing in. And so when I tell you about Habakkuk, I've told you that this is a godly man that is just having a conversation with God. We don't know much about him. All we know is that this is a largely unknown figure. We don't know who his mom and dad is. We don't know where he's from. All we know is he is a prophet and he's a musician. He's in the temple. The last chapter of this book, there are 3 chapters, is a song that he writes to God. So he's like a worship leader, like prophet / worship leader. That's who wrote the book. The politics of the time is really interesting. Judah, which is, you remember the kingdom of Israel split, right? Now, if you got to track with me for just a second to fully get this. So the kingdom of Israel split. You had Israel and you had Judah. By now, Israel is gone. Judah is all that's left. And Judah is in an unusual moment in history. There was a king named Josiah that was a great and wonderful king. Josiah found the Bible after it had long been lost in the kingdom. And he has this amazing revival in his own heart, which results in a revival in the kingdom of Judah. And so what he does is he burns all the idols. He changes the entire nation. People repent by the thousands. And all the prophets are finally seeing God move again in Judah, because God had long been something that nobody cared about. It was a country that God had founded with a people that didn't care about him anymore. And just when you thought nobody was going to care about God anymore, you could walk into the temple and you could find idols to pagan gods inside the temple. People were making pagan sacrifices. They were participating in horrible rituals. And then just at that moment in history, God sends this king named Josiah. He has a radical conversion. He burns all the idols, has this great revival, changes everything. I mean, God works in a powerful way, and then he dies. See, he goes out to a war. And he's a good king, right? He's a good and honorable king. He doesn't just send his army out to war. He goes out to war himself. He gets on a horse. It's a war against Egypt. Egypt had asked if they could travel through Judah to get to the land north of Judah. And Josiah said, no, you're not going to pull us into this war. And so he has the gall to fight the Egyptians, the great and powerful Egyptians. And he dies in that war. His son becomes king. And then a little bit later, his other son becomes king. And here's what you need to understand about it. When his other son became king, he was a horrible man. And so you have this great revival under Josiah. But when his son Jehoiakim became king, he was like one of the least godly people in all of Israeli history. He actually kills a prophet for disagreeing with him. He is a tyrant that the Bible tells us. He's a despot who is only concerned about the building of his own palace. So you have a revival with Josiah. His son comes on the scene and he's an evil man. And Habakkuk lives through this entire experience. The world is in an upheaval. Egypt is in the south. The Assyrian Empire is on one side. The Babylonian Empire is on the other side. Judah is this tiny little insignificant country in the center. And here's this prophet, and he's seeing this very dangerous and precarious moment. The politics aren't looking good for Judah. Their faith is faded, and Habakkuk shows up on the scene. There is a crisis inside of Judah. There's a crisis outside of Judah. Like the nation is being squeezed. It's a horrible situation. And Habakkuk, as a prophet, is living in this moment. Now, you have to think for just a second. He's a prophet, right? There's one thing that a prophet wants. He wants the people of God to live like they're the sons and daughters of God. You know, that's what a pastor wants. Here tonight, I want you to see God. I want you to know God. I want you to have a relationship with God. And let's say nobody in this room had a relationship with God. There was a great revival. Everybody turned to God, like spiritual emphasis this week, okay? And everybody gets saved and everybody's moved and deepened in their relationship with Jesus. And I'm a prophet and I'm like, God, you're awesome. Praise you for doing this. And then all of a sudden, within a few years, all of you become pagans again. And I'm a prophet and I'm sitting back and I'm asking God, why is this happening? Why have you forsaken your people? Why are you allowing your people to do these pagan things and to live in this pagan way? Why, if Judah is your kingdom, then why are you putting us in this situation with all these evil armies on every side of us? God, what are you doing? Why are you allowing all of these things to happen? Why couldn't Josiah's revival continue? Why does Jehoiakim have to be so bad? Why do we have to worry about the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Syrians? Why? That's when Habakkuk lived. He lived when Josiah was king, so he saw and tasted revival. But he's writing this book when Jehoiakim is king and the whole nation is turned against God. And in Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 2, here's what it says. How long, O Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen? Or cry out to you violence, but you do not save? Why do you make me look at this injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? The law is paralyzed and justice never prevails. Habakkuk asked a question that like every single Christian I know has asked. He asked a question that every single Christian I know has asked. He asked, God, why are you allowing this to happen in the world? He uses 4 words. He says, there's destruction, there's violence, there's contention, there's strife. It's all going around. The whole world's falling apart. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, God, why are you allowing this? Like, God, where are you when your people are forsaking you? God, where are you when these people are trying to kill us? It's a question he asked. He asked God, why? Have you ever been angry at God? God allows something to happen in your life. Some tragedy comes into your life. You don't know what to do. And so you point your finger at God and you assume his throne and you wave your hand at him and say, God, why? God, why did you allow this? We've all done that in our lives. I've done that in my life on a number of occasions. God, why are you doing this? That's the question that the book of Habakkuk begins with. That's the cry Habakkuk has with God. We have a prophet that, unlike any other prophet, we don't see the prophet preaching at the people on behalf of God. It's he and God in a tiny room having it out. God, where are you? Why are you allowing this to happen? And you know what's crazy is God replies to Habakkuk immediately. And in verse 5, God answers him. And he gives a great answer in verse 5. He says, Habakkuk, look at the nations and watch and be utterly amazed. For I am going to do something in your days that you would not believe even if I told you. If I told you what I'm about to do, Habakkuk, you're not going to believe what I'm about to do. And to Habakkuk, this is a great answer at verse 5. This is awesome. Because here's Habakkuk, world's falling apart, everything's going on. And we're not talking about like his cat died and he failed his test and, he's got pneumonia. We're talking about, the whole nation is pagan. We're talking about other nations around that are brutal people. They're going to kill these people if something doesn't happen. God, why? God, why? God, why? And God answers the question. Everything looks good. Hey, Habakkuk, I'm going to do something amazing. I'm going to blow your mind. I'm up to something, right? That's the cliche church answer. You come up and you ask the pastor, what's God, why is God allowing this in my life? God has a plan for your life and it's amazing. You don't even believe it. That's the exact answer God gives to Habakkuk. Habakkuk says, God, why are you allowing this? God says, wait a second, look and see what I'm going to do. It's going to be amazing. If I told you, you wouldn't even believe what I'm about to tell you. In fact, in the Hebrew, this phrase, I'm going to do something, is a continuous action. God's saying, I'm already doing something. Now, let me just pause there for just a second. See, when you think God is nowhere, when you think he's silent and away and ignoring you and doesn't care about you and is busy and preoccupied with other things, when you think God is just relieved himself from your life and far away from you, he is already at work inside of your life. Everything looks good. So far, so good. Everything looks good. God, why? Habakkuk, you have no idea what I'm about to do. I'm going to do something that's going to amaze you. And then verse 6, Habakkuk chapter 1. God says, I am raising up the Babylonians, that ruthless and impetuous people who sweep across the whole earth. Now, here's what your reaction should be when you read this. That's not good news. See, the Babylonians are the most brutal army in the entire world at this time period, okay? So Habakkuk says, God, why are you doing this? When are you gonna listen to us? And God replies, yo, dude, I got this under control. I'm gonna do something that's gonna amaze you. And so the next verse should say, Habakkuk, I'm gonna cause a revival. Everybody's gonna repent. The whole nation's gonna believe in Jesus, or not Jesus then yet, but the whole nation is gonna worship me again. The temple's gonna be alive again. Habakkuk, there's gonna be a revival that makes Josiah's revival look like a little kid revival. I'm gonna do something amazing. But what does God say? Hey, Habakkuk, I'm gonna utterly blow your mind. I'm gonna get the meanest, most ruthless people on planet Earth, and they're gonna smash you like a little gnat. They're gonna kill your children. That's what he says. And Habakkuk's response is basically, God, that doesn't make any sense. God, don't you know who these people are? Like, how could that be your plan? How could your plan be to take people that are worse than we are to destroy us? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Do you know who these people are? And then God describes who these people are. He knows who they are in the text. He says, they're feared, they're dreaded, they're lawless, they're arrogant, they're fierce, they're swift, they're violent, they're scoffers, they're mockers, they're powerful, they're guilty, and their strength is their God. Their horses are swifter than leopards, and they're keener than wolves in the evening. They are going to destroy you, is what God says. And God expects Habakkuk to give him a high five. And Habakkuk at this point is totally confused. Totally confused. Because it's this up and down experience. And when you're confused by God and you don't understand God, you have this up and down experience where you cry out to God, God, all I want is to know why. Just give me an answer. And so God gives him the answer. And he says, God, I'm going to blow your mind. I'm going to do something that's going to amaze you. I'm going to take the most ruthless, mean, and evil people on planet Earth, and they're going to smash you to smithereens. Sounds like a great plan, God. And Habakkuk is totally confused. This is not the answer that he wanted. So he says in Habakkuk 1:12, Lord, are you not from everlasting? My God, my Holy One, you will never die. You, Lord, you have appointed them to execute judgment. You, my rock, have ordained them to punish. You've ordained and appointed them to execute judgment. And then Habakkuk asks the key question in verse 13. He says, your eyes are too pure to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrongdoing. Then why on earth do you tolerate these treacherous people? Why would you allow the wicked to swallow up those who are more righteous than themselves? What are you doing, God? I know we're bad, but they're worse. So how can you take those people and kill us? I mean, this is like saying, when Osama bin Laden was alive, saying to Osama bin Laden, hey, will you go kill the, Ahmadinejad in Iran for us? It just doesn't make any sense. How could you take these people and do this? Habakkuk is totally confused. That's the story, okay? I told you the story. That's the story. This prophet is in this terrible situation. The people's faith has died. Everybody's worried about the political situation around them. This prophet goes into the temple. He confronts God. God, why is this happening? Don't worry, Habakkuk. I got it under control. I'm going to blow your mind. I'm going to do something amazing. I'm going to have these people destroy you. So what should we learn about this? I'm not going to give you the answer till next week why God did this. But from this point in the story, I'm going to teach you a few things and then we'll be finished. 4 simple points. Point number 1, even prophets doubt sometimes. Even prophets doubt sometimes. You see, you might be conditioned growing up perhaps in Christianity, as some of you have, from the time you're a little kid, that doubt is something for the unbeliever. Doubt is something for the less committed Christian. It's the Christian that has it all together is the one that doesn't doubt. The Christian who has a weak faith, that's backsliding all the time, that has like hidden sins inside of their life, they're the Christians that doubt. But the good Christians, they don't doubt. That's how lots of us believe. We believe doubt is a bad thing. It's like a disease to faith. But if doubt is a disease to faith, then I got a question. Like, Moses was a doubter. Jeremiah was a doubter. Job was a doubter. The Apostle Thomas was a doubter. Habakkuk is doubting. If doubt is like an enemy to faith, then why do the great people in all of the Bible happen to struggle with this particular thing? See, I remember when I was a little kid in like second grade or something, I had this second grade Sunday school teacher, and she was mean as a snake, and everybody was scared to death of this woman. And I grew up in the South, in South Carolina, and there's nothing like a mean Sunday school teacher with a perm, okay? And this woman, she snarled and she spit when she talked, and she was tough, and she had a man voice too, and it made it a little scary, okay? And she was like a very, very, very tough, mean lady. And her way of trying to make us as little second graders love Jesus was to just scare the hell out of us, okay? And literally, she wanted to scare us out of hell into heaven. That was her mentality. And so she would tell I didn't cuss, okay? I said, literally, I was speaking literally, but all that. Okay, never mind. Don't tweet that, okay? And YouTube edit. Okay. Well, thanks, Randy. Thanks for the support. I appreciate that. If I need a job, I'll call you. Okay. So this woman, she was mean. And she taught us all the Bible stories, and it was interesting when she taught us these Bible stories. It's like all the characters were somehow like bad. You didn't want to be like any of these people. She emphasized all the bad things. Anybody been in a church before where all they did was emphasize the bad things? Don't do this, don't do that, And not the fact that Moses led the children of Israel through the Red Sea. It's that Moses did a few bad things along the way. It wasn't that Moses, who was a stutterer, had the courage by faith in God to lead the people. people, it's that Moses had some faith problems sometimes. She emphasized the unredeemed part of these biblical characters, not the redeemed part of these biblical characters. So you can imagine what she did when she got to the Apostle Thomas in the New Testament. Because Thomas was the doubter. He was the doubting apostle. Anybody remember Apostle Thomas, right? Doubting Thomas. That's his name. We've called him Doubting Thomas for like 2,000 years. And so when she started telling stories about Doubting Thomas and started telling us a story, I mean, she said, you know, that little crooked finger in our little kid faces, don't you ever be like Doubting Thomas, right? Because Thomas had the nerve to doubt Jesus. And Christians don't ever doubt Jesus. They don't doubt Jesus. And so don't you be like Doubting Thomas. And so I grew up thinking that Doubting Thomas was like the worst of all the apostles. He was like the bottom of the food chain. Thomas was like just below, like just above Judas. That's where Thomas was. It was like Judas, Thomas, and the rest of the bunch. And Peter was probably right above Thomas, okay? And so I had this horrible, horrible view of doubt and of Thomas, and then I started doubting in my own life. I started asking myself, like, why do I believe the Bible? What makes the Bible any different than other books? I started doubting Christianity when my parents divorced and we found out that the pastor counseling them through their divorce had been simultaneously in an affair with another pastor's wife. I started doubting things when I started discovering that a lot of my faith I had inherited from my culture and I had inherited from my family. It was part of my culture more than it was the faith that I owned. But then what did I do? I'm doubting, and all I remember is this Sunday school teacher telling me that like Thomas is like the worst Christian in the world. And I'm thinking like I'm the worst Christian in the world. I got like the doubt disease. It's like gangrene. My arm's gonna fall off. You know, not really, but close, okay? Metaphorically speaking. I started feeling like this horrible, anybody ever doubted before? Yeah, anybody ever felt really bad about doubting, right? But you know what? Doubting isn't a disease. Doubting is part of your spiritual development. See, I've since learned a little more about Thomas. I've learned that Thomas wasn't the worst of all the apostles. He was the only apostle that touched the wounds of Jesus. The only one. The only apostle that touched the wounds of Jesus. You see, it was the doubting apostle that he doubted because he wasn't content just to have Peter or John's experience with Jesus. He wanted Thomas's experience with Jesus. It wasn't enough to just see Jesus through the eyes of mama or daddy or my church or my school or my friends or my family, or my RA or my prayer leader or my SLD or the pastor that preaches in convocation, the pastor that's preaching tonight or whatever. It wasn't like, he wasn't content with just Peter's faith. He needed Thomas's faith. And so he walks up to Jesus and says, you know what? I'll believe you, but I want to put my hand in your side. I want to touch your wounds. And what did Jesus do? He let him. He let him. See, I grew up thinking that we have an impatient Jesus that we follow. A Jesus with a gavel and a Jesus with a hammer. And he follows us around, waiting for the opportunity to show us he's got a hammer, you know, and he just smacks us with it. But you see, Jesus in Scripture was patient with the people who were struggling to hold on to their faith, but were having genuine struggles in their life. And so what happens with Thomas? Thomas actually ends up having a testimony of Jesus that was his own testimony. And Thomas wasn't the worst of all the apostles. Thomas not only was the only apostle to touch the wounds of Jesus, but do you know from church history that we know that Thomas didn't die in disbelief. Thomas died as a martyr in South India. And 2,000 years later, I could take you on an airplane to South India, to the state of Kerala, and I could introduce you to an entire denomination of churches that trace their lineage 2,000 years back all the way to the missionary that brought the gospel to their country. And one of the least Christian of all countries in all the world, the seed of the gospel has been there for 2,000 years because of a doubting apostle who wanted to have his own experience with Jesus. You see, doubt wasn't the disease that destroyed Thomas's faith. Doubt was the catalyst that made him be a person with his own testimony about Jesus, his own faith. And so it shouldn't surprise us that great men and great women of God in history were doubters at moments of their life, because doubt forces you to find out for yourself what you believe, not just what people have told you is true. And at moments in our life where the walls start tumbling in, where the ground underneath us seems to shake, where the storms are raging around us, where the questions are too hard to answer and the circumstances are unbelievable and our feelings are so private, we don't have anybody that we can share them with. What we have to understand is that when we walk inside of a storm, we're walking in the storm with a Jesus who knows our struggle, and he is right there in the heart of it. And Jesus isn't scared to have a finger pointed in his face occasionally as we struggle to believe. You see, even prophets doubt sometimes. See, Habakkuk thought he knew God. He thought he understood God, but God was working in a way that blew his mind. Number one, even prophets doubt sometimes. Number two, okay, Habakkuk thought that the answer would help him. Habakkuk thought that the answer to his why question would help him, but in the end, all it did was leave him with more questions. I'm going to talk about this point more next week in a more nuanced way. But let me just say this. You don't need answers. You need God. When you come to the point in your life, when you come to a crisis point in your life where you don't know what to do, what you've got to understand is you will never know yourself out of having to have faith. You will never come to a point where you're so smart and you have all the answers that you can know enough that God doesn't require faith from you. The Bible says in the book of John that without faith, it's impossible to please God. Without faith, you can't even please God. Faith is the catalyst for the great things of God. You don't have a parting of the Red Sea unless you have faith. You don't have miracles unless you have faith. You don't have salvation unless you have faith. It takes faith to please God. And a lot of us come from a particular mentality growing up in the Western world, a very logical mentality where we think if we just know enough, if we just have the answers, then we'll be able to believe. But the truth is, the more you know, the more questions you have sometimes, and you're never going to know yourself out of faith. God says, it's by faith that you please me. See, he thought he needed answers, but in actuality, he needed God. See, when your life really falls apart, you may ask lots of why questions. You may point your finger in the sky. You may yell and scream and ask those why questions. But you know what's interesting, and this is point number 3, that Habakkuk, and listen, pay attention to this, okay? Habakkuk had enough faith to question God, but barely enough to trust him. So let me ask you a question. If you say, and maybe I'm talking to a very particular individual here tonight, but if you say you don't believe in God anymore, then why are you asking him why? You see, the belief in God is something that is transcendent. It doesn't take logic very long to come to the end of itself. You know, you can be like you can believe in every form of evolution, right? You can be an evolutionist, not a creationist. But eventually you come to a point, even if you follow that philosophy, that scientific philosophy, that theory, you come to a point where you have to ask yourself, well, still, where is the uncaused cause? What created something out of nothing? You see, you'd be hard-pressed to find a single person in the entire world that, if very honest with themselves, down deep in their heart, do not actually believe in some kind of God. There's a lot of people that put up an affront, but the people that know the most about how the world works believe in God, or in something that they replace God with. You take the greatest scientific development of our age is the Human Genome Project. It's not getting to the moon. It's not the development of the nuclear weapon. The greatest scientific innovation of modern times is the Human Genome Project. What happened is a group of scientists banded together and they did something that is absolutely unprecedented. They actually identified, organized, and replicated the human DNA. We actually know every single connection of human DNA. And you know, the scientists that was responsible for that, Francis Collins, wrote a book called The Language of God because he believes in God. Because when he really got to the human life at that kind of molecular level, he could not help but believe that something divine must have created something with this level of complexity. It had to be something more than just some chance, like something happening. At some point, the divine hand of God had to be involved in the creation of DNA at its most like minute level. You see, the smartest people in all the world either believe in God or they try their hardest to replace the idea of God with an undefined theory. And there are theories after theories after theories. You take philosophy classes and you learn about the moral law and the arguments of complexity and the cause argument, all these things that I've kind of alluded to tonight. But let me ask you the question again. Why do we have enough faith to question God, but not enough faith to trust God? See, Habakkuk, he tries really hard. He tries really, really hard to hold on to God while waiting for all of this to make sense. And that's the last point. See, Habakkuk had enough faith to believe in him by questioning him, but not enough faith to actually trust him. And so what do we find? We find a desperate prophet who's doing everything he can to hold on to his faith. He tries hard to hold on while waiting for all this to make sense. And the conclusion in Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 1 is Habakkuk looking at the sky, just hearing what God said about the Babylonians coming, and he responds, I will stand my watch, and I will station myself on the ramparts. I will look to see what he will say to me, what answer I am to give to this complaint. I'm just going to stay right here, and I'm going to wait, and I'm going to listen. I'm going to keep my ears tuned to God. I want to know why. Habakkuk asks God why. God responds in a way that isn't pleasing to Habakkuk. Habakkuk questions God again. How could you allow those people more evil than us to destroy us? He asks God another question. You'll find out next week what God does with that question. But what does he do in the meantime? And this is the conclusion tonight. What does he do between the question and the answer? What does he do when he has enough faith to ask God why, but barely enough to trust him? What does he do in the intermediary time period between a revelation and the fulfillment of that promise? What do you do? What do you do when the bottom falls out? When you've run out of options? When the world seems to fall apart? And you close yourself up in your private little place, maybe just in the depths of your own mind with your own questions. Like Moses did, like Jeremiah did, like Job did, like Habakkuk did, like Thomas did. You point your finger in the sky and you say, God, why? Why have you allowed this? Why have you allowed this tragedy in my life? Why have you allowed my dream to fall apart? Why have you allowed my relative to die? Why have you allowed my parents to divorce? Why have you allowed my questions to go unanswered? Why have you not allowed me to be free of this particular thing? Why is it one bad thing after another bad thing? And the moment between your question and between God's response, how do you handle that moment? Because see, this is where we can learn from Habakkuk. He had the same questions that we have. But the truth is, he was closer to God than most of us are. And so he had the same questions. He also had the same struggle. But he handled the situation a little differently than we typically do. Between the why and the answer, he just said, I will stand my watch and I will wait. It's like that verse in the Old Testament. God, I don't know what to do, but my eyes are on you. You see, you think you need answers, but you don't need answers in your crisis. You just need to know you're not alone, that God is still with you, that you have more than just the circumstances that you're in. You think you need answers, but if you have those answers, will your heart feel any more healed? Or will it still be broken? You think you need answers, but you still won't have that person in your life. You still won't have that dream back. You still won't have whatever it is that you've lost. You think you need answers, but what you actually need is God. And you will never come to a point in your life where you can know enough that God doesn't require faith, because it is only in faith and only in crisis where we actually learn to know the God that performs the greatest miracle in history, which isn't raising the dead or parting the Red Sea. The greatest miracle in history is his ability to take a human being whose life is utterly falling apart, and yet they still have hope. Because God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And God will always be with us. And he is with you right now. And you think this is a matter of why. It's an intellectual question. Well, I want to ask you, if it's a matter of an intellectual question, then why is your heart jumping inside of you right at this moment with God speaking to you? If it's the intellectual answers you need, then why is the one thing that makes you feel better when the crisis comes is just feeling close to someone that cares for you? You don't need why. You need God. And even when you want to run away from him, he's with you. Now, I read this story not too long ago. The story was about a famous Holocaust survivor. His name was Eli Wiesel. And he was a teenager when he was captured by the Nazis and dragged away from his town in Transylvania to Auschwitz. He and his entire family. And while in Auschwitz, his mom and his sister died. And then the Nazis marched he and his father by foot to Buchenwald, the other great, horrible concentration camp for Jews. And he was freed from Buchenwald by the Allied forces, but it was just a few days after his father had died. And so here's this teenage kid. He's lost his entire family, been at the heart of this crisis. You know, it's interesting that one time a reporter asked him why he could still be a person of faith despite enduring such tragedy. And while he's not a Christian, I think his words are applicable to us when we come in the same situation. Here's what he told the reporter. He said, I have never forsaken my faith, and it has never forsaken me. Whatever has been shaken within my faith, for faith has always been present. The question was, what is happening in the world? Why is it happening in the world? And according to what design? So yes, if there is a shaking of faith, but there is also faith. Another reporter asked him, have you ever asked God why? And he said what I think is just an incredibly profound sentence. He says, I have not answered the why question, but I have not lost my faith in God. I have moments of anger and moments of protest. And sometimes in those moments of anger and those moments of protest, I've been closer to God for that reason alone. You think you need answers, but what you actually need is God. And next week you'll hear what it is that God told him. But before we get to next week, I just want to ask you to take a moment and reflect on what we've heard here tonight. whether it has to do with your doubt, whether it has to do with a struggle of a situation in your life, whether you're on the edge here tonight. So as the band comes to lead us in a closing song, I think we should all just kind of take a moment. We can bow our heads. We can examine our own hearts. If there's anybody that's here tonight that really is in that desperate place here tonight, life's falling apart for you or something is happening that you're having a hard time dealing with, in a moment when we start singing this song, I'd invite you, you can come to this altar and get on your knees. And just by doing that, other students and leaders and some adults here tonight, you're all adults, but they'll come and they'll pray for you. You don't have to share any specific information with them, but they'll just lay their hands on you and they'll pray for you. You don't need answers. You need God. So God, would you search our hearts? I know that some of the stuff I've said tonight is a little heady. But I pray that the truth of your word and the testimony of the story will be to those who need it the most tonight exactly what they need. So as we worship, we pray that you would continue to speak to us. And for those here tonight that are really struggling in a particular area in their life, they are Habakkuk with his questions of you. I know I don't even have to ask. I praise you that you are as patient with their questions as you are with Habakkuk's. And that they one day will be a Thomas who will say that in this moment in my life, when I felt farthest away from Jesus, was the moment where for the first time, I had my most intimate experience with him. And for a generation to come, may they be preachers that the Savior of the world is alive and well, working in the lives of his people. In Jesus' name, amen. You can stand as we sing. If anyone needs or wants to come pray, you can come at any moment, and folks will just come and pray for you.